Leslie here with Parenting Paused. Another week, here we are, just exploring in this podcast. What we do is we examine and we explore. We're not so interested in right or wrong. This is not a podcast that's going to tell you what to do and how to do with your children to get them to behave. It's more an exploration into our internal experience. What drives us? So if we sit in that seat, we are going to step more into being a learner than actually being a knower. Now, we talked about this a little bit last week, right? It can be such a precarious seat to sit in, to actually sit in the seat of learner versus knowing. Because as a parent, there is this sense, at least there was for me, that since I was the adult, that I should know. I should know what's best for my daughter. I should know what to do. I should know how to be. And I remember the first time that I didn't know, it was so disconcerting. And so, of course, when I didn't know, I wanted to grab hold of the wheel and get in control. And I started looking on the internet and I started trying to study and started trying to figure out, how do I know how to get her to behave? That was actually what happened, because it was so uncomfortable when she actually didn't do what I asked her to do. I just didn't. Funnily, I don't even think that's a word, but I didn't even expect it. I thought I had everything. I thought I knew how to be kind and loving and conscious. And I thought if I did all those things, she would listen and she would do what I ask. Oh my God, it was so incredibly hard when I recognized that that wasn't the case. And I could either keep pursuing my attempts at knowing, I could keep adding knowledge to my parenting bank, or I could step into the seat of the learner. And when I did, I turned in and started learning so much about myself, especially around control. And when I was able to turn back in, I could look at myself through a lens from my adult more, through kindness. And that's what I'm going to support you this week. And if you're feeling a little bit out of control, if you feel like you're not doing well, and if you're guilting and shaming yourself for how your kids are behaving, take a little pause, slow down, turn back in, and look through the lens of kindness to yourself. Maybe you think that you have to know it all. Maybe you feel like you're a failure because if you did know, and if you'd study harder, and if you'd worked harder, your kids would be behaving. It's not true, because your kids' behavior is not a reflection on you. Even though it's probably going to feel that way, probably over the holidays you might have felt that. You may be feeling a bit of, you're let down, how challenging it might be. So you may be questioning yourself, why am I doing this? What's this about? Just turn back in with the lens of kindness. That this is challenging work. If you're here, if you're listening to Parenting Paused here, most likely you have made a commitment to be more conscious than maybe your parents were. And I think this is just part of evolution. I imagine that our children will carry more consciousness, especially if they've been saturated in our homes with more consciousness and awareness. They will carry that into their parenting, and probably their children are going to be more evolved on some level. I read that somewhere. The children come in more evolved. So in that way, we are the learners. We're not the knowers. We know about our past, and maybe we know what we think we know. But if anything, the last 3 years have really shaken up my world. I imagine yours too. There was a lot that I thought I knew that I have found out that I didn't know. So using examination and inquiry back into ourselves with the lens of kindness really will give you the opportunity to be with yourself versus to judge yourself, versus to guilt yourself, which is an escape. When we guilt, it's an escape. It's a refusal to be intimate with all of those feelings, all of those stories we tell ourselves that usually are not true. They're stories to try to protect us, to take care of us. And of course, we want to believe the story that we're in charge and that we know everything and that we know what's best. And yet, honestly, It's not a true story, and it doesn't really support what we talked about last week, that deep, deep connection, and asking ourselves, where do we parent from? Where do we live from? Where do we treat ourselves from? Can we find that heart, that open-hearted relating to each other, to ourselves, and truly surrender some of our need to be right, our need to control, our need to make life the way that we think it should be. Have a great week this week, loves. We'll see you next week with Parenting Paused. Thank you for listening to this episode of Parenting Paused. If you enjoyed the episode, do me a favor and share it with your mama friends. You can also leave a review wherever you listen, which will support getting the Pure Joy message out. Come on over to the Pure Joy Parenting Practice Facebook page or join me on Instagram to hear more. And don't forget to download your free copy of the Safe Seat course on the Pure Joy website. And while there, check out the offerings page to go deeper in the Pure Joy work.